Thanks for joining us. I'm Nancy Furness, and this is We've Got Issues. Our interview today is taking place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of Coquitlam First Nation. So we thank the Coquitlam people who continue to live on the lands and to care for the lands and the waters and all that lie above and below. Today I'm joined by Geoff Scott, who is a longtime community television advocate, the founder of Tri-Cities Community TV, and currently the producer of Tri-Cities Magazine. So thanks so much for joining us today, Geoff. Today we're going to start with sort of a series of short conversations about community television. And today I'd like to maybe focus a little bit more on the history of community TV. Can you start us off by telling us a little bit about your roles over the years in community television and maybe a little bit about what inspired you to get involved in the first place?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I guess inspiration came from my mother, who got tired of me as a youth watching TV and suggested perhaps I should be a little more engaged and knew about community TV and told me to go check out community TV down at Kitsilano.
A wise mum.
Wise mum, and being that it was down by Kitsilano, it wasn't too big of an order to have to head down there. I used to hang out at Kitts Beach all the time, so one day I just wandered up the street a little bit to check out the community TV office that existed right on the corner of Cornwall and by the bridge there. And found there was an office where there were two people running the office, and their full-time job essentially was to take people like me off the street who showed interest.
Wow.
And would teach us, you know, the basics. It wasn't a production school, but they'd teach you how to frame a shot and how to follow action, how to use their production gear. And of course, we're talking now in the mid-'80s, where production gear was substantially different than what we have today. We didn't have phones with cameras in them. It was just big, bulky gear, and you were editing tape to tape as opposed to digitally these days. But nonetheless, it was a great opportunity. I learned the basics of video production, and within months was involved with producing a magazine show in my own community.
Wow, and you were how old?
This was just out of high school, essentially. So I would have been maybe 18, 19 years old when I first got involved. Yeah.
Pretty impressive. And then what have your roles been since then? I would imagine they would have changed and evolved a little bit since the time of the big bulky cameras and the tapes and everything.
Absolutely. The roles haven't changed that much, but the gear certainly has.
Okay.
So when we started, it was around the time of Expo. I do recall some of my early gigs. We would be, you know, essentially pulling up in a truckload with 5 redhead lights that weighed, you know, 25 pounds each. So you had a 100-pound lighting kit you had to carry somewhere onto the Expo site, and then you had to go back there and pick up your almost 100-pound camera. Even the tripods nowadays, they're very lightweight little units, where in those days the gear was heavy, so you had to support it with, you know, fairly heavy wooden tripods. That, yeah, it was quite a different experience doing production in those days, for sure.
So you learn to appreciate what you have now rather than just jumping in.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the role that community television serves in our communities?
Absolutely. So I really can't speak to the role now because it hardly exists, but certainly back in those days when there were dozens of offices throughout the lower mainland, each office almost had its own role, because they were designed essentially to be a platform for the community, if you will.
Right.
So the Tri-Cities community, for example, was very sports orientated. The majority of the programming was coverage of the Adanacs, lacrosse, or junior hockey. There was also a magazine show as well, as far as what happened in the community, but the vast majority it was kind of sports related.
So was there an overarching organization, or was everybody just doing their own thing?
Well, in the early days it was Rogers before Shaw came to town, and now back to Rogers again. But in those days it was Rogers, and they were the ones that kind of were charged with having to create community TV. So they did it was all their efforts to create these community offices and community studios. Many of them were located along the transmission lines. It would be where their offices are located, so that you can send a signal to what was called head end.
Oh, wow. What kind of year was this?
It was about 85, 86.
So we're still talking around Expo?
We're still talking about an Expo then, yeah. And so all these little offices in each community were there to kind of help build community.
Right. And as far as community, who was working at these stations? I would imagine it was still volunteer, being community television, but who was involved?
It's a good question, and you name it. You know, a lot of people got involved like me. They were perhaps interested in getting to film and television. And in those days, early 80s, if you were interested in film or television, really BCIT was your only option for education.
Okay.
So if you applied there, you pretty much were guaranteed to get a form letter saying, go get some experience at Channel 4 with Rogers, because that was the place where people went. And
stepping stone.
Very important stepping stone.
Right.
And I found it, that was my intent, was to be my stepping stone into production, to go to school eventually. And I thought, well, if I can learn the basics out in the field for free, then when I'm going to school, I have so much more education I'm building on rather than starting from square one. So that was my intent. But within a year, I found that I was the one who was producing a magazine show.
You didn't know that you were going to become the foundation.
I didn't know I was going to be the foundation of it. So yeah, as a co-producer of the magazine show and as a person who is offered paid work on a regular basis, working with a variety of multicultural producers that produce programming on the channel, I eventually just went into the industry. I didn't even go to BCIT. Years later, I did take some time off. I went to Vancouver Film School to learn, I think it was called multimedia in those days, just so I could have a diploma in some capacity. But yeah, I just found for myself, it was learning the skills, and I kind of just rolled right into production.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe how community television differs from all the other forms of media that are out there? What's special about community television?
That's a very good question, and actually, to get into that, what I can do is there's a clip we put together for the CRTC that showed a couple of the videos that had been produced by a local community TV group a number of years ago, prior to my being involved with with Tri-Cities Community TV.
Right. I
had started a group called Independent Community TV in Vancouver.
Oh, okay.
And so with them, we put together a little demo reel that showed the CRTC kind of what we were capable of doing, because at that time the cable companies were claiming that, well, the community can't do broadcast quality on their own, they need us to do it. So
Is that true?
Well, according to the CRTC, once they saw the video we presented to them, they said, well, no, we've refuted the claim by the cable companies that they're required, right? We were quite capable of doing it on our own. But there was one clip that ended in that piece. It was an interview with Rick Hansen, and he was involved in a wheelchair basketball group.
Rick Hansen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So in Britannia Centre. And it was, to me, this was a brilliant example of community TV, because here you're getting insight to somebody before they became famous.
Right.
Just when they're the average Joe struggling with whatever struggles
Everyday
you have.
problems that everybody's grappling with. And
exactly. And then the regular media, well, they'll go cover you once you've gone around the world in a wheelchair or created something spectacular.
Really interesting, because you miss all those finer details, all the context, all the history, that community television really does pick up on that and has the opportunity for people in their own communities to be involved, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And do you still have that clip?
Yes, I still have that clip. Actually, we can roll it now if you'd like.
I would love to see it. I'm sure everyone else would too.
Okay, so here's a look I will throw to it if you don't mind. But it's a clip from the Van East Community TV office.
Well, I wasn't in athletics, so I don't know what I'd be doing now.
How about the other people? What would they do?
I'm not sure.
It doesn't seem like you'd have to do something. If you're athletic, you'd do something athletic, I suppose.
That's right. I would, if there was no sports for me, I don't know what I'd do. I need a release for my competitive nature and my to devote my energies to. And if I couldn't do it to sports, I don't know what I could. I'd probably go crazy.
I think Rick has proved that a wheelchair isn't going to stop him from being athletic.
I know we want to sort of focus more on the history and the background of community television, but can you just give us a glimpse into how community television has changed since the 1980s, 1990s? Just maybe a brief overview of how it's changed?
Absolutely. So in its heyday, I would say, in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a point when there were over a dozen offices located throughout the lower mainland. Half of those offices actually included a studio as well. So there were some smaller offices that were just basically a small office space and editing suites, but a number of them actually had a fairly large studio component.
So the production could actually take place there
Could
as well.
take place right in that facility. In the smaller offices, you could always go book one of the bigger offices and go shoot a production there. But anyways, this vast network existed throughout the Lower Mainland. And as I said, each community really had its own little aspect. Kitsilano, it was more kind of kite festivals and tea party kind of stuff.
Okay.
It wasn't very political by any means. When I grew up and started producing stuff there, I was doing Thunderbird hockey, for example, with the mobile trucks, whereas the Van East office was far more political.
Right.
They were dealing with SkyTrain, dividing their
Yes.
community, so they had all sorts of programming about, how is our community going to react to this
Part of the beauty
issue.
of community television is you can tailor it to what's happening right within that specific location.
Exactly. Whatever was going on in that community, that was the order of the day. To give you a better idea, here's a look at a promo that I helped produce for Rogers in 1994.
Do you think the CRTC knew what it was doing when it created community television? Huh?
Community television is 25 years old in Western Canada, and Rogers is taking this opportunity to celebrate all of its programming activities in the West. It all started with a single black and white camera in the company boardroom and a control room set up in a closet. Today, Rogers has 22 portable cameras, 8 mobiles, 8 studios, and 24 edit suites, serving 6 license areas and 23 communities in the Lower Mainland, Victoria, and Calgary.
Vancouver, 1969. Victoria, 1970. Victoria, 1970.
Calgary, 1971. Surrey, 1974.
Abbotsford, 1975.
Fraser, 1976.
For the past 25 years, people have used the channel to talk to their neighbors and talk and talk and talk about local issues, money, food. Access, public involvement was what set the community channel apart from broadcast television.
Ready, one. Burnaby, 1976. Take 2.
Richmond, 1976.
Kitsilano Neighborhood Television, 1976.
West End Neighborhood Television,
1978.
a very good year.
Vancouver Eve,
Neighborhood television,
1979.
Langley Neighborhood Television, 1990.
Rogers Community Television offers a wide variety of very local programming. Here are just a few examples of ways in which the community finds its voice on this unique service. Full-length coverage of public forums and in-depth coverage of local politics. Sports for every age and interest.
First clean round proves that it can.
There's the tip at half court to begin the second half.
Valuable exposure for local artists in dance, theater, and music. Interactive programming, a format that was pioneered on the Community Channel.
Please do call in. Our guest is the Mayor of Burnaby, Bill Copeland.
Give us a call, 734-4611. Complain about playoffs, complain about Canucks, whatever.
Thank you. And the ultimate phone-in program, the Telethon. Rogers Community Channels in Western Canada have raised over $7 million for charitable causes. Nonprofit organizations also gain exposure through electronic community bulletin boards and playback of public service announcements, totaling over 10,000 messages annually. And special interest programming gives a voice to hundreds of groups and individuals, including Canada's many ethnic communities. No celebration of community television would be complete without a tribute to our volunteers. People from the community who host and produce programs, run cameras, do lighting, sound, editing, and even directing.
Take one.
There are over 1,000 volunteers working at Rogers Studios in the West. Volunteers learn valuable skills, and many go on to careers in television. Keep an eye on Rogers Community Television. As we enter the next quarter century, you'll see more from us.
So what would you like to see happen? Like, would you like to go back to the way that community television was, or is there a path that we can maybe talk about a little bit more just quickly here, and then we can spend some more time in another interview coming up on that?
For sure. It is hard to say. I mean, I would love to see community TV back to what it was, but there is a question of whether that is actually feasible.
Is it funding, or is it something else?
Well, there's a number of factors. Really, the biggest factor is, to me, is the ability of people to even volunteer time anymore.
Oh, okay.
You know, back in the 80s, I was at a high school. I could do a part-time job, and I could volunteer some of my time. Yeah. Nowadays, I think, you know, youth are pretty hard pressed to go out and get a job right away and be paid for what they're doing. Right. So I'm almost thinking, like, if we want to rebuild community TV, we're going to have to really look at getting more seniors involved and people who have the time to contribute. So you know, those kind of factors are going to weigh heavily on how.
The demographics have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
The other thing too, of course, is the cable companies have divested themselves of the obligation of running a community channel. So we are actually working with the CRTC to try and have a community fund created. Separate from commercial productions? Yes, exactly. Yeah, okay. Right now there's a fund called the Canadian Radio and TV Fund that is millions of dollars. All the revenue is generated anytime there's a purchase of one cable entity over another, or one media group over another. Any kind of media transactions between different organizations, a percentage of that money goes into the Canadian Media Fund. So we're hoping to work with the CRTC and create a sister fund that would be called the Canadian Community Media Fund. And in that case, again, the monies would be generated from the same revenue stream, but some of it would go into this fund as opposed to all going into Canadian community or Canadian TV and television fund. Right. So hopefully get community television back up to the level of production and important roles that it used to play in the 1980s and 1990s. We can talk, hopefully, some more about that in another interview. Is there anything else you'd like to say with respect to the history or how community TV has evolved or anything like that? A lot of people I hear today saying the lack of community in general. Right. And I think that is, you know, again, what we had just talked about. There's changing, our society is changing, you know. Right. Youth need to be able to pay bills right away. Even adults don't necessarily have the time to retire as soon as they would like. That's true. There's a lot of changes in our society that make it tough to... Well, and I think another thing is, you know, the advent on the scene of things like TikTok and all the, you know, short little clips that are here and there, and everybody's attention is being diverted in so many different directions that it kind of changes the landscape as well. So absolutely, and that's an interesting discussion actually too. That is part of the reason that community TV actually has been set back. Is the cable company's argument to the CRTC has been, well, now there is the internet. We don't need to have to be burdened by community TV anymore, because people can just post what they want on the internet. What do you think about that? Is it a solution? I think it's a pretty poor compensation for what we used to have. You know, if you have a talented feline or you have a message that you want to get out to the world, sure, I guess YouTube is there for you. Yes. But where's the coordination of community, you know, people in the community to work together to create a larger production? The issues, yeah, all of that is gone, right? So the only way it's going to happen is if an independent group forms and does it themselves. The cable companies don't want to do it anymore. Okay. And that's fine. I think if community groups want to do it, then the money should be available to them to do it, and cable companies should take a step back. By my way of thinking, that was the one mistake we made in the first place. If you look at community TV around the world, usually it's an independent organization, or in some cases it's universities, what have you.
Okay.
But it's not cable companies.
Right, so you're
Canada is the only country in the world that said, hey, cable companies are nice guys, they know TV, they should run the community channel.
We're subjected to the whims of the cable company.
Absolutely, and I think this is a big mistake. I think communities should be funded to produce it themselves. The funding certainly come from the cable companies, but I don't think we need them to tell us how it should be done.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having the discussion this afternoon, Geoff, and we will come back and talk about funding and some issues like the future, where community television is going, and some other topics as well. So thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Nancy Furness, and we have been talking to Geoff Scott, who is the longtime community advocate for community television and a well-known face here in the Tri-Cities. We'd like to thank Coquitlam City Centre Library for providing us the space to carry out this interview.
Tri-Cities Community TV is looking for new members interested in becoming part of our production team. Our members produce programming that promotes and documents the activities of over 25 community groups here in the Tri-Cities region.